Keanu Reeves woke to find a single word carved into his front door: return. No sign of how it got there, no clue who left it. Was it a warning? A plea? Something from his past calling him back? But to what? What Keanu discovers next will change everything he thought he knew about his life. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Keanu Reeves woke before sunrise in his quiet, modest home, nestled among the towering pines of the Pacific Northwest. The soft gray light of dawn filtered gently through the gauzy curtains, casting long shadows on the wooden floors. The air was cool, carrying the fresh scent of damp earth and pine needles, a calm that Keanu had grown to cherish after years spent in hectic cities and blinding spotlights. His morning began like any other, steeped in a peaceful routine that grounded him. He slipped quietly out of bed and moved barefoot across the polished hardwood floor. The familiar creak beneath his feet was a comforting reminder that, despite everything, some things remained constant. In the kitchen, he carefully prepared his morning herbal tea, a soothing blend of chamomile, lavender, and a hint of mint. He preferred this ritual over the bitter bite of coffee, finding its warmth more nurturing than energizing. As the water steeped, the aroma filled the small kitchen, wrapping around him like a gentle embrace. With the steaming mug in hand, Keanu settled into his favorite armchair by the window. Outside, the early birds began their songs, and the leaves rustled softly in the morning breeze. For a moment, he closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, centering himself in the quiet stillness. His phone buzzed on the table beside him. Messages from independent film collaborators, notes from charity foundations he supported, and the occasional text from close friends filled his inbox. But unlike his past, when every notification demanded immediate attention, he now chose which threads to follow carefully. He had traded the relentless pace of Hollywood for a slower, more deliberate life. Despite the simplicity of his current days, Keanu's mind was never idle. He thought often about the projects he had yet to start, the people he could still help, and the stories that needed telling. His passion for meaningful work remained alive, burning quietly beneath his calm exterior. The morning light grew brighter as he finished his tea. A deep sense of gratitude settled over him for the peace he'd found here, away from the chaos and noise. But beneath the calm, a subtle unease had begun to stir, an unshakable feeling that something was about to change. After finishing his tea, Keanu rose and moved toward the front door. One of his few remaining old-fashioned habits was to step outside each morning to retrieve the newspaper. He appreciated the ritual, a tangible connection to the world beyond his quiet sanctuary. He opened the door slowly, the familiar creak breaking the silence. The cool air greeted him immediately, a sharp contrast to the warm kitchen behind him. His eyes scanned the front yard, taking in the neat shrubs and carefully tended flower pots. The neighborhood was still asleep, the early morning mist clinging to the tall trees like a delicate veil. But then his gaze fell upon the door itself, and everything changed. Deeply etched into the warm wood were letters carved with deliberate precision. The grain had been gouged so that the letters cut beneath the protective finish, exposing raw wood beneath. The single word read clearly: return. Keanu froze, the mug slipping from his fingers and shattering quietly on the porch floor. His heart pounded in his chest, and a cold rush swept through his body. The word felt like a message aimed straight at him, charged with meaning he could not yet grasp. He reached out hesitantly, tracing the edges of the carved letters. The cuts were rough and fresh, made with care and intention. Whoever had done this had spent time and effort, and they had risked being caught. His mind reeled. Who could have done this? How? When? And why? There were no signs of forced entry anywhere. The lock was intact. The porch light showed no disturbance. No footprints marred the soft dirt or leaf-strewn path leading to the door. Nothing seemed out of place, and yet the message was unmistakable. Keanu pulled his hand back, unsettled. The quiet world he'd built, carefully and deliberately, felt fragile in that moment. It was as if a silent alarm had sounded beneath the surface of his peaceful morning. Slowly he stepped back inside, closing the door gently behind him. His breathing was uneven. This was no ordinary day. Inside the house, Keanu's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The single word carved so deliberately into his front door echoed relentlessly in his head. Return. The weight of it was more than just letters scratched into wood. It carried meaning. Urgent, personal, and haunting. He moved slowly toward the living room window and gazed out at the familiar landscape shrouded in the early morning mist. The tall trees stood silent, their branches heavy with dew. The garden he had nurtured for years looked untouched, serene as ever. Outside, everything seemed still, normal. But inside, everything felt suddenly unsteady, fragile. As if this peaceful world he had built was just a delicate veneer, waiting to be shattered. What was he being asked to return to? The question twisted inside him, a tight knot of uncertainty and unease. Return to the person he was before? Return to a time he'd left behind, willingly or not? Or was it a warning, a plea from someone who knew him deeply, someone who had watched quietly from the shadows? He thought about his past, not the glamorous public life filled with flashing cameras and red carpets, but the quieter beginnings. The days when acting wasn't about fame or fortune, but about the love of storytelling and connection. The time when he volunteered in community theaters, taught kids, gave back without expecting anything in return. The idealism that had once burned fiercely in his heart. Had he lost that? Or had life simply drifted him away from those ideals bit by bit, until they were almost forgotten? His fingers absently traced the rim of his tea mug, long since cooled. The warmth he had sought from the herbal blend now felt distant, replaced by a cold realization. This message was more than vandalism. It was a summons, a challenge, a question posed to the core of who he was. Keanu sank into his chair, the familiar creak echoing through the stillness of the room. He clasped his hands tightly, steadying his breath as waves of conflicting emotions rose within him. Confusion, curiosity, fear, and something deeper, the stirring of a longing he hadn't felt in years. He recalled the moments of clarity he'd had during meditation, when his thoughts had briefly cut through the noise and settled on the truths he often avoided. The quiet voice inside that reminded him of promises made long ago, before life had pulled him in so many directions. What if this was that voice calling louder than ever? What if the word return was a mirror held up to him, reflecting not just a message from outside, but from within? His phone buzzed softly on the table. Notifications from projects and friends, reminders of meetings and commitments. Usually he'd reach for it immediately, diving back into the current demands of his life. But now, the sound seemed intrusive, almost irrelevant. For once, Keanu didn't want to escape into the endless stream of obligations. He wanted to sit with the question, to let it unfold fully before rushing to answer. He leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the silence grow. The word echoed again in the quiet. Return. Return to what? Return to whom? The calm of the morning had been shattered, replaced by a stirring that felt like the beginning of something profound. His quiet life, carefully cultivated over years, was about to be pulled into a new direction, a journey of reflection and rediscovery. Keanu knew this moment was more than coincidence. Someone had sent the message with intention, with purpose. Whether friend or stranger, the meaning was clear. It was time to look back, to reconnect with the roots he had planted long ago. And deep inside, Keanu felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The word return, was no longer just a chilling mystery scratched into wood. It was an invitation, an awakening. Keanu Reeves was ready to answer. Keanu sat quietly on the edge of his worn leather couch, the weight of the morning's discovery pressing down on him. The single word, return, etched deep into the wood of his front door, echoed relentlessly in his thoughts. It felt less like vandalism and more like a message with a purpose, one he could neither understand nor ignore. Reaching for his phone, Keanu dialed the number of Lisa, his longtime personal assistant and trusted confidant. Over the years, Lisa had become more than just an assistant. She was a steady presence who understood the rhythms of his life and the delicate balance he maintained between privacy and the outside world. "Lisa?" Keanu said when she answered on the second ring, his voice calm but tinged with concern. "Something unusual happened this morning. When I stepped outside, I found a word carved into my front door. The word is, return." Lisa was immediately alert. "Return? That's unexpected. Are you okay? What does it look like? Is it a threat?" Keanu described the word in detail, the way it was deeply etched with precision, the sharp edges of the carving, the fact that it was done carefully, deliberately, and without any visible signs of forced entry or disturbance around the house. "It's unsettling," he admitted. "There's no sign anyone approached the door, no footprints, no damage to the lock or frame. It's as if the message appeared on its own." Lisa's voice softened, reassuring. "I'll start reviewing all security footage from last night immediately. We upgraded everything after that break-in years ago. The cameras, sensors, they should have caught anyone." Keanu nodded, grateful for her professionalism. "Thank you, Lisa. Please let me know as soon as you find anything unusual." The call ended, but the silence that followed felt heavier, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Keanu stared out the window into the stillness of the misty morning, feeling suddenly vulnerable in a place he'd long considered a sanctuary. About an hour later, Keanu's phone rang, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over his home. He answered, recognizing Lisa's voice immediately, calm yet carrying a note of puzzlement. "Keanu," she began, "I've gone through every single hour of footage from last night into early this morning. I reviewed the cameras facing every approach to the house, the driveway, even the side gate. There is nothing, no people, no shadows, no lights, nothing at all near the front door." Keanu's brow furrowed. "Nothing? Are you absolutely certain? Not even a movement?" "Not a thing," Lisa confirmed. "The footage is clear. The cameras are working perfectly. I also double-checked the infrared motion sensors and pressure plates embedded along the walkways. No triggers, no alerts." Keanu felt the tension tighten in his chest. His home was protected by a state-of-the-art security system. After a minor break-in several years ago, he had spared no expense upgrading it. Multiple cameras covered every inch of the property, set to record in low light and even through fog. The walkways were embedded with pressure sensors capable of detecting the faintest footstep. All these layers should have made any unauthorized approach impossible without detection. And yet, here was undeniable proof that someone had carved a message deep into the front door without a single hint in any security record. Lisa's voice was steady, but Keanu sensed the strain beneath. "I've already contacted the security company. They're performing a detailed diagnostic of all cameras and sensors to rule out malfunctions, hacking, or electronic interference. We're not leaving any stone unturned." Keanu nodded slowly, though she couldn't see him. "Please keep me informed. This feels bigger than a prank or simple vandalism." Lisa paused before answering, "I agree. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. It's deliberate, and it's personal." Those words hung heavy in the air. Personal. The word sent a chill through Keanu. Who could want him to return? Return to what? And why send such a message in such a haunting way? He allowed himself a deep breath. "Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate how thoroughly you're handling this. We'll get to the bottom of it," she promised. As the call ended, Keanu was left with more questions than answers. His mind spun with possibilities. Was it a message from someone from his past? An old friend? Or someone harboring a grudge? Or was it a cryptic call to rediscover something he had lost along the way? The peaceful home he had created now felt fragile, a calm facade hiding something unresolved. The rest of the morning unfolded in a haze. Keanu moved through his house like a man haunted, each familiar corner and quiet room suddenly charged with an undercurrent of vulnerability. His sanctuary, built to shield him from the relentless spotlight of his past, felt penetrated by a presence he could neither see nor understand. The silence of the woods surrounding his home, once a balm to his soul, now felt like a veil concealing unseen watchers. The gentle rustling of leaves and distant bird calls seemed distant and fragile, as if the natural world itself held its breath in anticipation. His phone buzzed again. It was Lisa. "I've expanded the search," her message read. "I've contacted neighbors, reviewed traffic cameras from the nearby roads, and scanned for any unusual activity or unknown vehicles. So far, nothing suspicious. No unfamiliar faces, no strange cars or deliveries. Nothing." Keanu's heart sank deeper. The absence of any trace was more unnerving than any clear threat could have been. It was as though the message had materialized by some inexplicable means, ghost-like and deliberate. He sank heavily into his favorite armchair, staring toward the front door. That silent witness to the mysterious intrusion. The carved word "return" seemed to pulse in the quiet, both a challenge and an invitation. His mind wandered back to the people closest to him, the friends and family who might hold clues or explanations. Was this a prank from someone who knew him well? A desperate cry for help from a forgotten corner of his life? Or something more profound? A reminder from his own past. He thought of the conversations he had once had, about returning to the roots of his craft, the values that had drawn him to his work and his causes. He remembered promises made, quietly and privately, to use his influence not for fame or fortune, but to inspire, to heal, to uplift. The word "return" wasn't just a message etched in wood, it was a summons to confront those promises, to face what had been left behind in the march of years. Keanu's phone buzzed again. Another message from Lisa. Still nothing from neighbors or local cameras. No one saw or heard anything unusual last night. The growing void of answers pressed against him, making the quiet in the room feel almost suffocating. How could something so tangible, a message carved in deep grooves, appear without a trace of its maker? He closed his eyes, breathing deeply as he tried to quell the flood of emotions rising within him. Fear, confusion, curiosity, and something that felt like awakening. For years he had lived quietly, protected by distance and discretion. But now the veil had been lifted. The message was clear. The past was reaching out. And Keanu knew, deep in his heart, that this was only the beginning. The journey to uncover the meaning of return would soon lead him down paths he had long avoided. Paths filled with memories, choices, and questions he was no longer able to escape. His sanctuary was no longer safe. The call to return was real and impossible to ignore. Keanu settled into his study, the soft hum of the laptop filling the room as he prepared for his video call with Maya, an independent film director whose work he admired deeply. The project she was pitching was raw and unfiltered, a story of resilience and human connection set against the backdrop of a small town struggling to survive. It was the kind of project that spoke to Keanu's soul, a sharp contrast to the glossy blockbuster scripts he often received. As Maya appeared on the screen, her passion was immediately evident. She spoke about the film's commitment to truthfulness in storytelling, about portraying characters with all their flaws and vulnerabilities, and about capturing moments of quiet bravery that often go unnoticed. Keanu listened, nodding slowly, yet his mind drifted. The word carved into his front door tugged relentlessly at his attention. Return. It echoed in his thoughts, a persistent beat beneath the conversation. He tried to focus, to engage fully with Maya's vision, but the carved letters haunted him. The mystery weighed heavily, blurring his concentration. His gaze flicked to the corner of the room where his phone lay silent, the glow of the morning sun casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The peacefulness of his home, the sanctuary he had built for himself, suddenly felt fragile. The word wasn't just a random act of vandalism. It felt personal, purposeful, as if a part of his past was calling out. He thought about his early years, before the fame, before the millions of fans, the days when acting was pure and unadulterated, when every role was a chance to explore human truth, not a stepping stone to stardom. When the stage was small and the audiences were close enough to see every flicker of emotion. Keanu's mind wandered to the countless hours spent in small theaters, the humble sets, the late-night rehearsals fueled by nothing but passion and a desire to connect. Back then, he was an actor because he loved storytelling, because it made him feel alive, because it gave voice to the voiceless. The word return gnawed at him like an old wound reopening. Was someone asking him to return to that time? To the authenticity he once embraced? Was it a call to remember the heart beneath the fame? The director's voice pulled him back from the edge of memory. Maya spoke earnestly about the film's themes, the rawness, the courage, the humanity. Keanu forced himself to focus, nodding at the right moments, hiding the swirl of emotions beneath his calm exterior. As the call with Maya continued, Keanu felt the pull of the present conflict with the ghosts of his past. Maya spoke passionately about artistic integrity, the raw power of authentic storytelling, and the need to tell stories that reach beneath the surface. She emphasized the importance of vulnerability in art, showing the messy, complicated parts of life that too often get glossed over in mainstream cinema. But Keanu's thoughts drifted. The carved word return weighed heavily on him, echoing like a subtle but persistent drumbeat beneath the conversation. His mind traveled back to a different time, a time before fame, before millions of fans and worldwide recognition. He remembered the smell of the old theater where he had first performed, a place where the paint peeled from the walls and the seats were worn thin from years of spectators. It was a tiny space, with a stage barely bigger than a living room, but the energy inside was immense. Every night, actors gave everything they had to connect, to be honest, to tell stories that mattered. For Keanu, those early performances weren't about becoming a star. They were about truth and connection. Those days had been driven by passion, not profit. He recalled the late nights spent rehearsing lines by dim lights, the camaraderie among fellow actors who all shared the same dream of making a difference through their craft. It was a pure love for storytelling, untainted by the pressures that would later come with Hollywood success. Keanu realized with a pang that something of that pure passion had been dulled over the years. The spotlight, the contracts, the endless cycle of promotion and expectation had pulled him away from the simple reasons he had started acting in the first place. The word return felt like a summons from that lost part of himself, a call to reconnect with the ideals he once held dear. Was someone reminding him? Or was it his own conscience, urging him to stop and reflect? Maya's voice pulled him back to the present. She was talking about the themes of her film: resilience, humanity, the beauty of imperfection. Keanu forced himself to focus and respond, nodding along, but inside, the message on his door lingered. He wondered if this was a sign, a turning point. Had he been avoiding the deeper questions about his path? Was it time to return to the stories that mattered, to the truth he once chased with unyielding fervor? When the call finally ended, Keanu sat back in his chair, the quiet hum of the laptop fading into silence. But the room felt anything but silent. The word return echoed loudly in his mind, as though it had taken up permanent residence, reverberating through every thought and memory. Return to what? Return to whom? The question hung there, heavy and unyielding. It was a call to confront the past, but also an invitation to rediscover something lost, perhaps even forgotten, within himself. Keanu's gaze drifted across the room, settling on a small collection of framed photographs and memorabilia from his early career. There was a picture of him standing backstage in a modest theater, the paint peeling from the walls, the stage lights harsh and unforgiving. His face was younger, filled with unfiltered hope and raw enthusiasm. That young man had dreamed of nothing more than telling stories that mattered, stories that touched lives, that stirred hearts. He remembered the countless nights in that tiny theater, when the applause wasn't thunderous but genuine, when the connection between actor and audience was intimate and real. Acting was never about fame or fortune back then. It was about truth, about the vulnerability and courage it took to stand bare before a crowd and reveal something deeply human. But somewhere along the way, the clarity of purpose had blurred. The bright lights of Hollywood, the red carpets, the endless press tours, and the pressure to maintain a certain image had slowly pulled him away from that raw authenticity. The roles became bigger, the stakes higher, but the simple passion that had ignited his love for storytelling felt more distant. The carved word on his door was more than an enigmatic message. It was a reckoning, a mirror reflecting the distance he had traveled from the man he once was to the man he had become. It challenged him to question his choices, to peel back the layers of success and status, and to ask whether he was still connected to the heart of his craft. Keanu stood and moved to the window, the cool morning light casting long shadows across the floor. Outside, the towering trees swayed gently in the breeze, indifferent to the turmoil inside. The world was steady and quiet, but inside him, a storm was gathering. A storm of reflection, regret, and hope. He thought about the projects he had accepted over the last few years, the scripts that brought him acclaim and fortune, but not the fulfillment he craved. The roles where he had felt more like a product than an artist. The times when he had turned down offers because they didn't align with his values, but still felt caught in the relentless machine of expectation. The word return was a summons to reclaim what he had lost. It was a call to return to purpose, to passion, to authenticity. But answering it would mean facing uncomfortable truths. The parts of himself he had set aside, the dreams that had faded into the background. Keanu's thoughts drifted to the people who had once inspired him, mentors, friends, and fellow artists who valued honesty above spectacle. He remembered the conversations about art as a force for change, about storytelling as a way to heal and connect. Those ideals had once guided him like a compass. Had he let the compass slip? The weight of the message was both a burden and a gift. It demanded courage, the courage to strip away pretense, to embrace vulnerability, and to step back onto the path he had once walked with such conviction. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult. It would require him to confront the past and reconcile it with the present, to rediscover the reasons he fell in love with his craft, and to allow that passion to guide him forward. As he stood by the window, Keanu felt a stirring deep within, a flicker of something bright and real. The call to return was no longer just a mystery carved into wood. It had become a mission, a turning point. Keanu Reeves was ready to answer. The journey back to himself had begun. That afternoon, after a morning filled with a whirlwind of thoughts and the mysterious weight of the word etched into his front door, Keanu felt an urge to step away from his study. He needed air. A moment outside the four walls where his mind had been trapped in spirals of questions and memories. The fresh breeze outside greeted him like a balm, its crispness a reminder that the world was still moving forward, indifferent to his internal storm. Returning inside, he found an unexpected sight waiting for him on the kitchen counter. A small, neatly wrapped package. No return address, no note to explain who had sent it. Just a simple brown paper wrapping tied with thin twine. The mystery of its presence sent a familiar thrill down his spine, a sense that the pieces of this unfolding puzzle were beginning to connect. With careful fingers, Keanu untied the twine and unfolded the paper. Inside lay a single item, a faded photograph, yellowed slightly at the edges with the passage of time. The image was unmistakably of him, but years younger. The setting was a small, modest theater rehearsal space, far removed from the polished studios and film sets he knew now. The walls were bare brick, the wooden floor scuffed and worn from years of footsteps. In the photograph, Keanu stood at the center of a group of young actors, mostly teenagers and children. His posture was alive with passion, one hand raised as he animatedly directed the scene before them. The faces of the kids were full of eager concentration, some smiling shyly, others fully immersed in their roles. The raw energy of the moment was palpable, a snapshot of an early chapter in a life dedicated to storytelling and connection. Keanu's eyes traced the scene slowly. He could almost hear the faint echoes of voices, the rustle of scripts, the soft creak of the floorboards. This was a glimpse back to a time when his art had been a bridge between worlds, a gift offered freely to those who might never have otherwise touched the magic of theater. He turned the photograph over and found a handwritten note, its ink faded but still legible. The script was elegant, deliberate. Remember when your art was for the people, not the spotlight. Keanu's fingers lingered on the words. The note felt like a whisper from the past, a gentle reminder of a mission he had once embraced fully, but had since allowed to drift away under the weight of fame and expectation. Seated at the kitchen table, Keanu held the photograph and note carefully, as if they were fragile relics of a forgotten dream. The memory they evoked was bittersweet. In the warmth of those early days, bitter in the recognition of how much time had passed, how much had changed. He recalled the community theater where that photograph was taken, a place that had become a sanctuary for many young people from underprivileged neighborhoods. Keanu had volunteered there often in his youth, drawn by a simple desire to share the transformative power of art. He remembered the feeling of watching those young faces light up when they discovered the ability to express themselves through story and performance. The theater had been far from glamorous. The seats were old and worn, the stage lights dim and uneven. Yet, there was a magic that no Hollywood set could replicate. It was in the genuine enthusiasm of the people who came to watch, in the dedication of the volunteers who gave their time without expectation, and in the belief that art could heal, uplift, and connect. Keanu's memories swirled as he thought about the hours spent rehearsing plays, coaching hesitant actors, and witnessing small but profound moments of growth. The joy of those times was rooted not in applause or acclaim, but in shared humanity. The note's message, "Remember when your art was for the people, not the spotlight," struck a chord deep within him. It was a call to honesty, to remember why he had chosen this path in the first place. He thought about how his life had changed since then. The massive studios, the global audiences, the constant media attention, all of it had brought success and opportunity, but also distractions and compromises. The man in the photograph was a reflection of a version of himself that had been driven purely by passion and purpose. Keanu allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. The path he was being invited to reconsider was not an easy one. It meant confronting the ways in which he might have lost sight of his original mission. It meant asking whether fame and fortune had overshadowed the authentic reasons he had started telling stories. Yet, beneath the weight of these questions, there was a stirring hope. The photograph was proof that the spark was still there, buried but not extinguished. It was a beacon guiding him back. When the call ended, Keanu sank back into his chair, the room around him quiet except for the soft hum of the laptop powering down. But the silence felt heavy, charged with the weight of the carved word that haunted his thoughts. Return. It echoed endlessly in his mind, demanding answers he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Return to what? Return to whom? The questions lingered, persistent and profound, as if the word carried more than just a message. It carried a summons to confront something long buried within himself. His eyes drifted across the room to a small shelf where framed photographs and keepsakes from his early career stood. One photo caught his attention. A snapshot of him from years ago, standing in the backstage of a modest theater. The walls were cracked and worn, the lighting dim and imperfect, but the energy was alive and electric. That younger version of himself looked different, wide-eyed, hopeful, full of unfiltered passion. The dreams were simple then: to tell stories that mattered, to connect with people in a way that transcended words. The stage wasn't a stepping stone to fame, it was a sacred space where truth came alive. Keanu recalled the countless nights rehearsing in that cramped theater, the smell of old wood and dust filling the air, the nervous excitement of first performances. Those were the days when acting was raw and honest, fueled by love for the craft, not by accolades or box office numbers. Looking around his more polished, celebrity-filled life now, he felt a pang of longing and loss. Somewhere between those early days and the life he had now, the clarity of his purpose had dimmed. The glamour and the spotlight had softened the edges of his truth. The carved word on his door was a mirror reflecting the gap between who he was and who he once was. A challenge to bridge that distance. It was a call to peel away the layers of fame and success and return to the authenticity and passion that had first ignited his heart. Keanu rose and moved to the window, feeling the afternoon light warm his face. Outside, the world was calm and steady, but inside, a storm was gathering. A storm of reckoning, reflection, and renewal. He thought of the roles he had played recently, some that brought recognition but little fulfillment. The scripts he had declined because they didn't feel true. The moments when he had questioned whether he was still the man who acted to tell stories or the man caught up in the machinery of celebrity. The word return was no longer just a mysterious message. It was a summons to rediscover himself, to return to the heart of his art, to the reasons he had fallen in love with storytelling, to the dreams he had once vowed never to abandon. The journey ahead would be difficult. It would require courage to face uncomfortable truths and embrace vulnerability once again. But beneath the weight of that challenge, Keanu felt a flicker of hope, a belief that he could find his way back. And with that hope, he knew one thing for certain: Keanu Reeves was ready to answer the call. That afternoon, Keanu sat at the head of a long conference table, surrounded by the board members of the charity foundation he had helped establish years ago. The room was bright and modern, filled with faces familiar and new, people dedicated to making a difference in communities that needed support. They were discussing the upcoming projects, fundraising efforts, and the impact reports from recent initiatives. Despite the weighty topics and the passion in the room, Keanu found his mind wandering. His thoughts kept drifting back to the mysterious packages that had arrived over the past days, especially the faded photograph from the community theater and the word return carved into his door. There was an unspoken message beneath all of it, something that tugged at the corners of his consciousness. The meeting was moving into the next agenda item when a soft knock interrupted. One of the staff entered quietly, carrying a small package. She approached Keanu and placed it gently before him without a word, then slipped out again. Curious, Keanu picked up the package. It was heavier than expected, wrapped in plain brown paper tied with twine, just like the last one. His fingers trembled slightly as he untied the knot and peeled away the paper. Inside lay a worn leather-bound journal. The leather was cracked and softened by time, its edges frayed. It looked like something treasured but long forgotten. Keanu opened it slowly. The pages were filled with his own handwriting, notes and sketches from years ago. As he flipped through, memories surfaced, ideas he had once poured his heart into, plans for community projects that blended arts education with healing programs for trauma survivors. The pages revealed a version of Keanu driven not by the pursuit of box office success, but by genuine compassion. He had envisioned spaces where art could be a tool for transformation, where children and adults alike could find solace and strength through creative expression. The sketches showed community centers, art workshops, and performance spaces designed to bring people together, to heal wounds both seen and unseen. The notes detailed outreach programs, collaborations with therapists and educators, and hopes for funding that would make these dreams a reality. Keanu felt a swell of emotion as he traced the words he had once written. Words full of hope and determination. The man who had authored these pages was someone fiercely committed to using his influence to uplift others. As he sat there, the sounds of the meeting around him faded into the background. The vision he had once held so clearly came alive again. He could almost hear the laughter of children participating in art therapy sessions, feel the quiet tears of survivors finding their voice through performance, and see the bright eyes of young people discovering their potential. He wondered aloud, his voice soft but filled with weight. When did those dreams fade? The question hung in the room, heavy and unanswered. The board members looked toward him, sensing the change in his demeanor. One of the senior members, a woman who had worked closely with Keanu since the charity's inception, spoke gently. Life has a way of pulling us in many directions, Keanu. It's easy to lose sight of those early dreams when the demands grow. Keanu nodded slowly, feeling the truth in her words. The film industry, with its endless schedules, press events, and financial pressures, had taken much of his time and energy. While he had maintained his charity work, the intensity of his initial passion had been diluted by the constant balancing act. He thought about the roles he had taken, the projects he had championed publicly, and the times he had missed family moments or quiet reflections because of work. The pages before him were a stark reminder of a promise he had made to himself, to use his gifts not just for personal success, but to make a meaningful difference. The room was silent as he continued flipping through the journal, coming across sketches for workshops that used theater and painting to help veterans cope with trauma. There were detailed plans for summer camps designed to foster creativity among underserved youth, alongside notes about collaborating with local mental health professionals. Each page was a testament to a dream rooted in service and healing. The contrast to the life he was currently leading was palpable. Keanu's voice softened. These projects, they were about more than charity. They were about connection, about healing through art. I've been so focused on the external world that I forgot how much power there is in creating spaces for people to heal. A board member nodded, adding, "It's never too late to bring those dreams back to life. Maybe this is the moment to refocus." Keanu closed the journal carefully, the worn leather creaking softly in his hands, as if it, too, carried the weight of forgotten promises. He looked up at the faces around the table, those familiar, trusted colleagues who had walked alongside him in this journey of giving, who shared the belief that their work could change lives. Their eyes held quiet encouragement, but more importantly, they reflected hope. Hope that the man they admired was ready to reconnect with the core of his vision. For a moment, Keanu allowed himself to feel the full gravity of what lay ahead. This was not just about reviving old ideas or launching new projects. It was about reclaiming a part of himself he had buried beneath years of fame, expectation, and the ceaseless demands of his career. The word return that had haunted him for days now seemed less like a mystery and more like a call to action. It was a summons to confront the distance between who he had become and who he had once dreamed of being, to realign his life and work with the ideals that had first drawn him to the arts, the power of storytelling to heal, to unite, and to uplift. Keanu's voice was steady but filled with quiet resolve as he spoke. "I want to honor this vision," he said, glancing back at the open journal, "to breathe life into these projects again. Not just as a part of our charity work, but as a fundamental part of who I am and the legacy I want to leave behind." There was a palpable shift in the room. The board members exchanged looks of support and anticipation. They had seen the passion and authenticity in Keanu for years, and now it seemed that the spark was being rekindled, brighter and more determined than ever. Keanu knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Reviving these dreams meant dedicating time, resources, and heart to endeavors that often don't come with immediate rewards or headlines. It would require patience, collaboration, and a willingness to face old challenges anew. But beneath the weight of that challenge, he felt something else rising, a quiet excitement, a renewed sense of purpose that made the obstacles seem surmountable. As the meeting drew to a close, Keanu felt a deep sense of gratitude. The mysterious packages, the haunting word, and the memories they had stirred were not random events. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, guiding him back to a truth he had almost lost sight of. That afternoon, surrounded by his colleagues and the echoes of his past hopes, Keanu Reeves took a decisive step forward, toward the dreams he had once cherished, and the future he was ready to create. The journey back to his true mission had begun. After a long and intense day of meetings, heavy with reflections stirred by the mysterious messages and memories, Keanu gathered his belongings and prepared to leave his office. The walls around him were decorated with photographs, awards, and mementos from a life shaped by success and struggle alike. Yet, despite the accomplishments, today they felt like distant echoes of another existence, one that didn't quite reflect the man he was becoming. As he walked through the lobby of the building, the familiar soft murmur of activity surrounded him. Receptionists chatted quietly, phones rang intermittently, and the hum of footsteps on polished floors filled the air. But near the entrance, Keanu's eyes were drawn to a solitary figure sitting quietly in a comfortable armchair. The woman was older, with gentle wrinkles around her eyes and a calm, knowing smile. She was absorbed in a book, its cover well-worn and its pages softened by time. The title of the book was clear: Voices of Change, Stories of Social Justice and Community Resilience. The scene struck Keanu immediately. Here was someone who clearly cared deeply about the power of stories to change lives. As Keanu approached, the woman looked up, her eyes brightening as she recognized him. "Keanu Reeves," she said warmly, standing and extending her hand. "It's been a very long time." Keanu blinked, surprised but pleased. There was something familiar in her presence, something grounding. "Grace Harper," she introduced herself. "I was the volunteer coordinator at the community theater where you used to spend so much time." Recognition slowly dawned. Grace Harper. The woman who had been one of the pillars of that small, scrappy theater from Keanu's early days. The theater where he had first fallen in love with storytelling, not for fame or fortune, but for connection and healing. "It's wonderful to see you again," Keanu said, sincerely, shaking her hand. "I didn't expect to find you here." Grace smiled gently. "Sometimes life surprises us when we need it most. I felt I should come to remind you of something important." They settled into the chairs near the lobby window, the noise of the building fading as their conversation began. Grace's presence felt like a bridge, a living link to a time and purpose Keanu had been searching for. Grace's voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of years spent nurturing community and guiding others through art and service. "I remember the promise you made when you first began volunteering at the theater," she said softly. "You spoke then of using your platform for more than personal gain. You wanted to give voice to those who had none, to create spaces where stories could heal wounds and build hope." Keanu nodded slowly, the memory vivid despite the years. "I meant it then," he replied quietly, "and I still do." "But," Grace continued, Life outside that theater is complicated. Fame and success bring pressures and distractions. It's easy to lose sight of the reasons we started. Keanu looked down, feeling the truth in her words. The packages, the carved word, return, the journal filled with his old dreams. All were reminders of promises he had made to himself long ago, promises that had drifted in the tides of time. Grace's eyes held his with gentle insistence. It's not too late. You can still lead with purpose, with heart. You can still return. Her words struck deep, stirring a quiet hope. Grace was not just a figure from the past. She was a compass, pointing toward a future rooted in meaning. The two men reached his turn in orbit. They shared stories then, of the community, of the children and adults who had found healing through theater and art, of the struggles and small victories that marked their journey. Grace spoke of lives changed, of voices lifted from silence. Keanu listened, feeling the ember of passion rekindle. Their conversation was unexpected, but profoundly needed, a reminder that Keanu's journey was not solitary. The past was not behind him, but woven into the path ahead. Grace was proof that the bonds formed in that community remained strong, ready to support him as he navigated the next chapter. As their conversation began to wind down, Grace reached into her worn leather bag and pulled out a small photo album. She handed it to Keanu with a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting both warmth and quiet hope. I thought you might want to see some of the moments you helped create. Reminders of what we built together. Keanu accepted the album carefully, feeling the weight of its presence in his hands. The cover was soft and faded, worn from years of handling. Opening it slowly, he found pages filled with candid photographs capturing scenes from those early days at the community theater. There were images of young actors, children and teenagers from the neighborhood, caught mid-rehearsal, their faces a mixture of concentration, joy, and nervous excitement. In one photo, Keanu stood at the center of the group, animated and smiling as he guided a shy girl through her lines. In another, a cast gathered on stage, beaming with pride after a performance. The photos revealed the raw, imperfect beauty of those times, cracked sets, threadbare costumes, and the palpable energy of a community coming together. Each image seemed to pulse with life, capturing moments of connection and transformation. The candid smiles, the hands reaching out for support, the eyes shining with newfound confidence, all spoke of a powerful truth. Art was a force for healing and hope. Keanu felt a surge of emotion well up within him. These were not just photographs. They were echoes of a time when his purpose had been clear and unshakable, when every story told, every role played, was a step toward building something greater than himself. As he turned the pages, memories flooded back. The long hours spent rehearsing in that cramped theater, the laughter and tears shared among cast and crew, the quiet moments when a young actor found their voice for the first time. These were the experiences that had shaped him, that had formed the foundation of his passion. Closing the album, Keanu felt a profound sense of gratitude, mixed with a bittersweet ache. The man in those photographs was still within him, waiting to be called forth again. The word return, carved into his door, was no longer just a mysterious summons. It was a beacon, lighting the way back to those values. He looked up at Grace, his voice steady but filled with new determination. Thank you for bringing this back to me. It's easy to lose sight of what truly matters amid all the noise. Grace nodded, her smile gentle and encouraging. It's never too late to come home to your true self, Keanu. The path you started on is still there, waiting for you to walk it again. Their chance meeting, the photographs, the shared memories, all of it felt like a turning point. The journey to return was no longer just a possibility. It was a commitment he was ready to make. As Keanu stepped out of the building and into the fading afternoon light, the burden on his shoulders felt lighter, replaced by a quiet hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but the direction was clear. The call to return to his art, to his purpose, and to the people he had once sought to serve was no longer just a whisper in the wind. It was a call to action, and Keanu Reeves was ready to answer. That evening, after the day's events had settled around him like the deepening dusk outside his study window, Keanu sat alone in the quiet sanctuary of his home. The soft glow of a desk lamp illuminated the room, casting gentle shadows over shelves lined with books and mementos collected over years of life and career. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the city beyond the trees, a distant reminder of a world that moved swiftly and without pause. Yet inside this room, time seemed to slow, offering a space for reflection. A rare gift for a man whose days often felt dictated by schedules and obligations. Keanu opened his laptop and began searching for footage from his earliest interviews and speeches, moments when the fire of youth still burned brightly in his voice and eyes. He found a recording from nearly 2 decades ago, a young man speaking passionately about the power of art, about its ability to heal wounds, bridge divides, and bring people together. As he watched, Keanu felt the familiar surge of that early idealism, the earnest conviction that storytelling was more than entertainment. It was a sacred responsibility, a way to touch lives and foster empathy. The words resonated deeply. Art has the power to transform. It can give voice to the unheard, shine light on hidden struggles, and remind us all of our shared humanity. Yet, as the video played on, Keanu's thoughts shifted. He questioned whether the life he now led, filled with blockbuster movies, red carpet appearances, and the relentless glare of the spotlight, truly reflected those ideals. Had the pursuit of success and acclaim gradually eclipsed the purpose that had once guided him? Had he traded authenticity for spectacle? The word carved into his door, return, no longer felt like a threat or a mystery. It felt like a call to rediscover the man he had been and the artist he still longed to be. Keanu paused the video and leaned back in his chair, letting the room's stillness envelop him. The glow from the laptop screen softened the lines of his face as memories stirred in the quiet. His thoughts drifted through the many roles he had played, the scripts he had read and brought to life. Some had been deeply fulfilling, stories that challenged audiences, that revealed truth beneath the surface, that connected people in unexpected ways. But there had been other times when the work felt like a hollow routine, performances weighed down by expectations of box office success rather than artistic truth. He thought about the relentless pace of press tours, premieres, and appearances, moments designed more to sustain an image than to nurture a craft. The pressures of Hollywood had shaped his life in ways he hadn't fully acknowledged. The constant balancing act between commercial demands and personal values left its mark, gradually pulling him away from the passion that had first drawn him to the stage and screen. Yet beneath the fatigue, a quiet flame persisted, a spark of purpose that refused to be extinguished despite the noise and distractions. Keanu's fingers brushed the edge of the leather journal he had been given earlier that day. The pages within held the visions of a younger man, handwritten notes and sketches for community projects that blended arts education with healing practices for trauma survivors. Dreams once vivid and alive, now tinged with the dust of neglect. He wondered aloud, is it possible to bring these worlds together, to honor the art and ideals that shaped me while navigating the realities of this career? The carved word return felt less like a cryptic warning and more like an invitation, an opportunity to realign, to remember, to reclaim. He stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the stars flickering in the darkening sky. The vastness above reminded him how small his struggles were in the grand scheme, yet how important his choices remained. The journey ahead would not be easy. It would require courage, honesty, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But it was a path he was ready to walk. As the night deepened and the world outside grew quiet, Keanu returned to his desk with renewed determination. He opened a blank notebook and began to write, the words flowing with surprising ease. Thoughts, questions, doubts, and hopes poured onto the pages, a torrent of reflection finally finding release. He wrote about the man he had been, the idealistic young actor who believed in the power of storytelling to heal, to unite, to inspire change. He traced the arc of his life, noting the moments when fame and success had overshadowed those original intentions. He acknowledged the compromises he had made, the distractions that had dulled his purpose. The word return became a guiding light through his introspection, a beacon calling him back to his core values. Keanu penned down his desire to create meaningful art again, art that went beyond entertainment and touched the heart. He envisioned supporting community projects that used creativity as a means of healing trauma and fostering connection. He imagined using his platform not merely for personal gain, but to uplift voices that had been unheard. The notebook filled quickly, each page a map pointing toward a future grounded in passion and integrity. He made silent promises to himself, promises to stay true, to seek out stories that mattered, to use his influence for more than just success. As the first pale light of dawn crept through the window, Keanu closed the notebook and sat quietly. The questions of purpose had no simple answers, but they had opened a door leading to a path he was eager to follow. And through that door, Keanu Reeves was ready to step toward a new chapter defined not by fame, but by meaning. The morning sun filtered softly through the blinds as Keanu entered his kitchen, the quiet of the house wrapping around him like a familiar cloak. The previous day's mysteries weighed on his mind. The carved word on his door, the faded photograph, the leather-bound journal. All pieces of a puzzle beckoning him towards something greater. As he moved toward the counter, his eyes caught sight of a small package resting where no delivery had been expected. The wrapping was plain, tied with rustic twine much like the others, but there was no return address. Intrigued, Keanu set down his coffee and carefully untied the knot, peeling back the brown paper to reveal what lay inside. Beneath the wrapping was an old, worn manuscript, its cover faded and soft to the touch. It was a screenplay, one he recognized immediately as a work from his 20s, written in the quiet hours between auditions and day jobs, when his dreams were vivid and unspoiled by the weight of fame. Keanu opened the script slowly, feeling the delicate pages beneath his fingers. The title page bore his name in neat handwriting, and beneath it the words, "A story of community, resilience, and hope." The memories flooded back with surprising clarity. He began to read, his eyes moving down the page, absorbing the themes that had driven his younger self. Stories of people bound together by shared struggles, stories of healing through connection, stories of hope in the face of adversity. What caught his breath were the annotations scattered throughout. Handwritten notes, underlined passages, and exclamation marks in the margins, all in his own youthful script. The enthusiasm, the idealism, the burning desire to make a difference were palpable on every page. But this wasn't just a script. It was a manifesto, a declaration of purpose penned by a man who believed in the power of storytelling to change the world. As Keanu flipped through the pages of the screenplay, each scene unfolded like a vivid memory, rich with characters who wrestled with hardship yet found strength in their shared experiences. The story centered on a tight-knit community grappling with loss and adversity, but rather than succumbing to despair, they forged bonds through creativity and resilience. Art was not just entertainment in this tale, it was a lifeline, a means of healing wounds both visible and invisible. He remembered writing this script during those late nights when the world around him felt overwhelming, yet his spirit remained untouched by cynicism. Back then, the city lights outside his small apartment window seemed to flicker with possibility. His desk was cluttered with drafts, coffee stains, and scattered notes, physical proof of a young man driven by a passion not just to act, but to make a difference. Throughout the script were handwritten annotations, underlined passages, exclamation marks, questions posed to himself, and reminders to deepen certain emotional beats. Keanu's youthful handwriting revealed a man brimming with hope, determined to give voice to stories often overlooked. Tales of resilience in the face of injustice, of people finding beauty amid brokenness. Words like empower, connection, and truth were circled repeatedly, signaling his fierce belief in the transformative power of storytelling. He recalled how those words had fueled him through times of doubt and rejection, reminding him why he had chosen this path. Yet now, as he sat in his quiet study surrounded by success and recognition, those once bright ideals felt fragile, almost distant. He wondered how much the relentless demands of fame and the Hollywood machine had clouded his vision. Had he lost sight of these stories in pursuit of blockbusters and red carpets? Alongside the screenplay, a folded letter lay delicately atop the pages. Its paper was worn and yellowed, edges softened from years of folding and unfolding. Keanu carefully unfolded it and read the single line inscribed in an elegant, flowing hand. "Will you return to the stories that matter?" The plea cut through him like a whispered truth. It was not merely a question, but a heartfelt challenge, a reminder that beneath the layers of fame and distraction lay a calling, still waiting to be answered. Keanu folded the letter with reverence, pressing it gently to his chest. This was more than a message from the past. It was an invitation to rediscover his purpose, to reconnect with the ideals that had once driven him to use art as a force for healing and hope. As he sat there, the morning sun casting soft light across the room, the weight of the question settled deeply in his heart. Would he return? Return to the stories that matter, to the truth and humanity that had always fueled his passion. Keanu lifted his eyes from the letter and script and glanced around the room, his gaze landing on the framed photograph resting on his desk, the image of him in that small community theater, surrounded by young actors and the warmth of shared creativity. It felt like a living bridge between past and present, a tangible reminder of the journey he had embarked on and the promise still within reach. The experiences evoked by the photograph and script began to merge in his mind. The carved word return, the faded photo, the journal of community projects, and now this screenplay. Together, they formed a narrative thread, pulling him back to the core of who he was and the work he was meant to do. This was no longer a puzzle to solve or a mystery to unravel. It was a profound calling, a call to reclaim his art and purpose, to embrace the stories that could inspire and heal, to dedicate himself anew to creating meaning beyond the glitz of fame. He thought about the future, the roles he would choose, the projects he would support, and the ways he could use his platform to uplift voices that often went unheard. The screenplay he held was not just a relic, it was a blueprint, a testament to the power of stories rooted in community, resilience, and hope. With a quiet but unwavering resolve, Keanu closed the manuscript and stood, walking to the window to look out at the awakening world. The first light of dawn painted the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, a promise of new beginnings. He understood that the path ahead would be challenging. Returning to these ideals meant confronting fears, making difficult choices, and sometimes standing apart from the easy allure of commercial success. But the flicker of hope kindled within him was stronger than ever. The word return was no longer just a carved message or a distant echo. It was a mission, a journey back to authenticity, passion, and purpose. Keanu Reeves was ready to step forward into that journey, embracing the stories that truly mattered and the man he was always meant to be. The following day, Keanu found himself standing outside the community theater where much of his earliest journey had taken place. The building had been renovated, its worn exterior freshly painted, windows sparkling in the morning sun. Yet, beneath the new facade, the heart of the theater, vibrant and alive, remained unchanged. The familiar sight stirred a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation within him. Memories flooded back. The dusty stage where he had nervously delivered his first lines, the small dressing rooms filled with laughter and late-night rehearsals, and the faces of young actors eager to learn and grow. As Keanu stepped inside, the rich scent of wood and paint mingled with the hum of activity. Volunteers moved purposefully through the halls. Young performers rehearsed lines in quiet corners, and the energy of creation pulsed throughout the space. He was greeted warmly by Maya, the current director of the theater, who had heard about his visit and made arrangements to welcome him. "It's wonderful to have you here," she said with a bright smile. "This place wouldn't be the same without you." Together, they walked through the theater, the echoes of the past mingling with the promise of the future. Keanu marveled at the new additions: upgraded lighting rigs, rehearsal spaces filled with fresh instruments, and classrooms designed for workshops and arts education. Yet it was the people who truly brought the space to life. Keanu met old friends who had been there during his early days: volunteers, coordinators, and fellow actors. Their faces lit up with recognition and warmth, the bonds forged through shared passion evident in their greetings. They reminisced about those formative years, recalling the humility and dedication that had defined Keanu's presence. Stories surfaced of late nights spent rehearsing, the challenges of limited resources, and the joy of small successes celebrated together. Keanu listened with a growing sense of connection. The visit was more than a reunion. It was a rekindling of a spark, a reminder of the man he once was and the influence he could still wield beyond the glare of fame. As the afternoon unfolded, Keanu found himself drawn into conversations with young actors who looked up to him not just as a star, but as a mentor who had walked the same path. They spoke of their struggles, balancing school, family, and the pursuit of their dreams, and the theater's role as a refuge and source of strength. One young woman, Lily, shared her story of overcoming adversity through the arts. Her voice trembled with emotion as she described how the theater had given her a voice when she felt silenced by the world. Keanu's heart swelled with empathy and pride, reminded of the power that storytelling held to change lives. The energy in the room was palpable, a mix of hope, determination, and the unspoken understanding that they were part of something bigger than themselves. Keanu walked the stage where he had once stood, feeling the roughness of the wooden boards beneath his feet. He closed his eyes, imagining the countless performances and rehearsals that had filled this space with life and meaning. This was where his journey had begun, not in the glare of cameras or on grand sets, but here, among community and creativity. The visit stirred a deep resolve within him. He realized that his influence, shaped by years of experience and success, could serve a higher purpose. It wasn't too late to return to the roots that had nourished his soul. He spoke quietly with Maya about plans to expand the theater's outreach, to develop programs that combined arts education with healing and empowerment, dreams he had once sketched in his journal, now ready to take form. The day was a powerful reminder that purpose and passion could coexist with success, that the stories that mattered were still waiting to be told. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm golden glow through the tall windows of the community theater, the atmosphere inside grew even more alive. Keanu found himself surrounded by familiar faces and new ones alike, all gathered for a small, informal event to celebrate the progress and spirit of the theater. The air was filled with laughter and soft conversation, stories exchanged like treasured gifts passed from one person to another. Children sat on the floor, their eyes bright with excitement, while volunteers and staff moved quietly among the crowd, offering gentle encouragement and kind smiles. Keanu stood quietly in the midst of it all, feeling the pulse of this vibrant community, a heartbeat that resonated deep within him. This place was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a sanctuary where hope flourished, where lives were transformed by the power of creativity and human connection. He listened as an older man recounted how he had found purpose volunteering here after years of struggle, how the theater had helped him rediscover joy. Nearby, a teenage girl shyly shared her first experience on stage, her voice steady despite the nervous tremor in her hands. These stories wove together into a rich tapestry of resilience and renewal. Keanu's gaze wandered to the walls adorned with photographs capturing moments of triumph and joy, cast parties, opening nights, workshops, and rehearsals. Each image told a story, a testament to the countless lives touched by this place. A quiet sense of gratitude filled Keanu's chest. The mysterious word carved into his door, the faded photographs, the journal filled with dreams, and now this gathering. All had led him back here, to the roots of his passion. He realized that the influence he carried extended far beyond the red carpet or the bright lights of the screen. It was in the ability to inspire, to uplift, to connect, to use his voice and presence to create spaces where others could find healing and hope. Keanu moved through the crowd, exchanging warm embraces and heartfelt greetings. He spoke with young actors, listening attentively to their aspirations and challenges. He offered words of encouragement, not as a distant celebrity, but as someone who had walked a similar path, someone who understood the struggles and the triumphs. Later, as the event wound down, Keanu found a quiet corner and reflected on the journey he had been set upon. The path to return was no simple road. It was marked by introspection, growth, and the courage to face hard truths. But standing here among these people, the dreamers, the artists, the changemakers, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The stories that mattered were not just scripts or roles. They were the lived experiences of those around him, stories of survival, hope, and transformation. Keanu Reeves had come home to a place where his influence could truly make a difference. And with that realization, a new chapter began, one where art and purpose would walk hand in hand, lighting the way forward. Back at home, Keanu settled into his study, the familiar comfort of his space wrapping around him. The day's experiences, the visit to the community theater, the stories shared, the faces of the young actors, lingered vividly in his mind. But now, a new task awaited, revisiting the footage of his earlier years, moments captured in time when the passion that had ignited his journey was raw and unmistakable. He sat before his laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The files were neatly organized, early acting roles, interviews, speeches, and clips from charity events he had once championed. Keanu pressed play on one of the first videos, a low-budget indie film where his youthful intensity was palpable. His eyes were bright, filled with earnestness and conviction as he poured himself into the role. Watching, Keanu felt a surge of pride mixed with a touch of wistfulness. That young man was full of fire, ready to change the world one story at a time. The drive to use art as a healing force, to bring attention to those without voices, radiated from every frame. Yet as the video continued, another part of Keanu observed the contrast, the distance between that idealistic young actor and the man he had become. The years had brought success, wealth, and fame, but also distractions, compromises, and the weight of expectations. Next, he pulled up interviews from early in his career. His words echoed through the speakers, discussing his belief in art's transformative power, his commitment to charitable causes, and his desire to inspire. The youthful optimism was striking, yet something in the tone hinted at a man still searching for his place. Keanu leaned back, the images before him stirring a complicated mix of emotions. Pride in how far he had come, but also regret for moments when he had perhaps lost sight of those original ideals. The word return, which had haunted him for days, now seemed less like an ominous warning and more like a personal challenge. A call to bridge the gap between past and present, to realign his actions with the dreams that had once defined him. He sifted through footage from charity events he had hosted or supported over the years. Smiling faces of children, grateful families, and community gatherings filled the screen. There were scenes of him speaking passionately about the importance of giving back, of creating opportunities through art and education. Yet beneath the surface, Keanu realized, these moments were often overshadowed by the glare of publicity. The media buzz, the carefully crafted image, they sometimes clouded the true purpose of his efforts. Watching himself interact with young people, offering encouragement and hope, Keanu felt a rekindling of the spirit that had drawn him to these causes, but he also saw the times when his attention had been divided, when the demands of his career had pulled him away from what truly mattered. He paused the video and closed his eyes, reflecting on how the delicate balance between fame and purpose had sometimes tipped unfavorably. The reflection was humbling. It was a reminder that good intentions were not enough without consistent, intentional action. Keanu opened a new document on his laptop and began to write down his thoughts and plans. He resolved to be more intentional with his time, to choose projects and commitments that aligned with his core values. He wanted to prioritize quality over quantity, meaning over mere visibility. His fingers moved across the keyboard, crafting goals that centered on authenticity, community impact, and personal growth. He envisioned dedicating more time to mentorship, supporting arts programs, and telling stories that mattered. The challenge laid before him by the word return was clear: to live with purpose, to close the gap between who he was and who he aspired to be. As the night deepened and the world outside settled into quiet stillness, Keanu remained seated in his study, the glow from the laptop screen dimming as he closed the document he had been writing. The words on the page were more than plans or goals. They were a heartfelt promise, a roadmap back to himself. He looked around the room, taking in the familiar surroundings that had witnessed both his triumphs and his struggles. Photographs of family and friends, awards from his career, and shelves filled with books and scripts created a tapestry of a life rich in experience, yet layered with complexity. These objects, once mere trophies of success, now seemed like markers guiding him towards something deeper, a legacy not defined solely by fame or fortune, but by meaning and impact. Keanu stood and moved toward the window. The cool glass cooled beneath his fingertips. Outside, the city stretched out beneath a blanket of stars, each one a distant beacon of light in the vast night sky. The enormity of the universe reminded him of his place in the grand scheme of things, both small and significant. The word return, which had echoed in his mind for days, now shone like a beacon of hope rather than a shadow of doubt. It was a call not to retreat or falter, but to realign, to reconnect with the passions and principles that had once fueled his journey. He thought of the young man in the videos he had watched earlier, so full of idealism and drive. That young man had dared to believe in the transformative power of art, in the ability of stories to heal and unite. The challenge was not to become that person again, but to honor that spirit within him, carrying it forward with the wisdom of years. Keanu's heart swelled with a mixture of humility and determination. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be distractions, setbacks, and difficult choices, but there would also be moments of joy, connection, and profound fulfillment. He realized that the true measure of success lay not in accolades or applause, but in the quiet impact made on the lives of others. Taking a deep breath, Keanu made a silent vow to live with intention, to choose projects that resonated with his values, to invest time in mentorship and community, and to tell stories that mattered. The journey to return was underway, and with it came the promise of renewal. Keanu Reeves was ready. Several days after Keanu's quiet reflections and visit to the community theater, he returned home to find a new package resting carefully on his doorstep. Unlike the others, this one was small, neatly wrapped in cream-colored paper and tied with a slender satin ribbon. The packaging suggested care and purpose rather than haste. There was no return address, but the elegant handwriting on the envelope was immediately familiar. It was the script of someone who had long influenced his life. Keanu's fingers trembled slightly with anticipation as he took the package inside and settled into his study, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating the room. Slowly, he untied the ribbon and unfolded the creamy paper to reveal a single, delicately folded letter. He recognized the handwriting instantly. It belonged to Dr. Helen Andrews, his former acting coach and mentor, a woman whose guidance had shaped not just his craft, but his very approach to life and art during those formative years. Helen's influence had always been profound, quietly instilling in him a belief that art was a sacred responsibility, a gift meant to heal, inspire, and connect. The letter began with a tone of gentle reflection. Helen wrote of the journey Keanu had taken, the bright, eager young man she first met, full of ideals and hope, and the man who now stood at a pivotal crossroads. She spoke of the dreams they had once shared, dreams of using art not for mere fame or fortune, but to uplift the vulnerable, to shine light into dark places, and to build bridges across divides. Her words were steeped in warmth and honesty. She acknowledged the challenges he had faced, the pressures and distractions of a demanding industry, and the way those forces could dim even the brightest of lights. Yet, Helen's unwavering belief shone through. The belief that the fire inside him had never truly gone out. Her letter was both a reflection on the past and a heartfelt plea. She urged Keanu to remember the passion that had first led him to the stage, the commitment to truth and empathy that had defined his early work. Helen's voice in the letter was like a beacon, calling him home. As Keanu continued reading, the letter grew more personal and revealing. Helen confessed that she had been behind the series of mysterious messages, the carved word on the door, the photograph, the journal, and the screenplay, all carefully chosen to guide him back toward his true self. She explained that the decision to intervene in this way had not come lightly. She had watched his career from afar, proud of his achievements, yet concerned by the distance growing between him and the ideals they had once cherished together. Helen's hope was to awaken the man she had once believed in, the artist who saw storytelling as a force for change, not just entertainment. Helen described the effort it took to assemble these reminders, reaching out to old friends, digging through archives, and carefully selecting moments that held meaning and resonance. Every piece was meant to spark reflection, to stir memories, and to challenge Keanu to reconsider the path he was on. Reading this, Keanu felt a deep swell of emotion, gratitude, surprise, and a profound sense of being seen and understood. The realization that someone had cared so deeply, had taken such care to gently but firmly pull him back, touched him in a way he hadn't expected. Helen's tone was unwaveringly kind, yet firm. She reminded Keanu that the journey to return was not a sign of failure or weakness, but of courage and strength. It was an invitation to rediscover the light that had always been within him, to lead with heart and integrity. The letter closed with a plea, written with a sincerity that pierced straight to his soul. Return to your true self, Keanu. The world needs your light, not the shadow of what it expects, but the brilliance of who you are. Keanu folded the letter slowly, holding it to his chest as if to hold the promise of a second chance. Helen's words were a mirror, reflecting his past, his present, and the future he could choose. Sitting alone in the soft glow of his study, Keanu allowed the gravity of Helen's letter to settle over him. The room felt quieter, the outside world distant and muted. He thought back to those early days of mentorship, the long hours spent refining his craft, the conversations that had shaped his understanding of art's deeper purpose. Helen had seen something in him then, a light that transcended technique, a soul willing to bear vulnerability for the sake of truth. Her belief in his potential had been unwavering, and now, through this letter, That belief was renewed. Her message was clear. The path to return was not about retracing steps or clinging to youth. It was about renewal, embracing the fullness of who he had become, while reconnecting with the values that had always guided him. Keanu placed the letter gently on his desk and looked around his study, filled with reminders of his journey. Photographs of family and friends, scripts of roles that had defined him, awards earned through perseverance, all now symbols of a life waiting to be integrated, reconciled. The word return echoed anew in his mind, no longer a mysterious command but a beacon of hope. It called him not just to remember, but to act, to realign his life and work with his true purpose. With a deep breath, Keanu made a silent vow. He would honor the artist Helen had nurtured within him, using his voice to tell stories that healed, inspired, and connected. He would seek out projects that reflected truth and compassion. He would mentor others, sharing the lessons he'd learned along the way. The journey ahead would demand courage, honesty, and resilience, but Keanu felt ready. The support and faith embodied in Helen's letter gave him strength to face the challenges. For the first time in many years, the path forward felt clear. Keanu Reeves was ready to answer the call, to return to his art, his purpose, and himself. The next morning, as sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, Keanu found another envelope waiting on his desk. It was thicker than the last, heavier with significance. With a quiet breath, he opened it and unfolded a letter from Dr. Helen Andrews. This time, her words carried a new revelation, one that would bring clarity to the mysterious journey he had been on. Helen confessed that she had not undertaken this mission alone. She had enlisted the help of a trusted friend, someone close to Keanu who had long been a silent guardian of his well-being, Tom, Keanu's longtime head of security. Helen explained that Tom had played a subtle but crucial role in delivering the reminders, ensuring they reached Keanu without causing alarm or suspicion. She revealed that Tom had no knowledge of the full extent of the plan. Helen had trusted him to act with discretion and care, knowing he would respect her intentions and the importance of the message. His role had been to place packages, ensure security details allowed for these moments, and quietly support the gentle awakening Helen hoped to inspire. Reading this, Keanu felt a wave of relief wash over him. The mystery of the deliveries, the carved word, and the personal items that had stirred his soul suddenly had a human face. Someone who cared deeply for him, who had been working quietly behind the scenes for his good. The letter detailed how Helen had reached out to Tom, explaining her hopes and fears. She trusted him implicitly and knew that his loyalty to Keanu extended beyond mere protection. It was rooted in genuine care for the man and his legacy. Helen wrote of the delicate balance required to deliver such messages without causing undue distress. She wanted Keanu to feel guided, not pressured, to awaken, not alarmed. Tom had been the perfect ally, steady, reliable, and compassionate. For Keanu, this revelation was profound. It wasn't just about the messages themselves, but about the people who believed in his original vision. Those who had watched from the sidelines, concerned but hopeful, ready to support him in reclaiming the path he was meant to walk. As Keanu absorbed Helen's words, a deep reflection settled over him. The truth that others cared so deeply about his purpose, that they had taken time, effort, and even risk to help him find his way back, filled him with gratitude and humility. He thought about Tom, the quiet, watchful presence who had been by his side through the twists and turns of fame and fortune. A man who had safeguarded not only his physical security, but, in this moment, his emotional and spiritual well-being. Keanu's mind wandered back to the many times Tom had shown not just professionalism, but empathy, anticipating his needs, offering calm advice, and sometimes quietly reminding him of what truly mattered. The letter painted a picture of Tom as more than a bodyguard. He was a guardian of Keanu's essence, entrusted by Helen to nurture the fragile flame of the artist's soul. This realization brought a sense of peace. Keanu was not alone on this journey. There were those who saw beyond the public image, who remembered the ideals and dreams he had once embraced, and who cared enough to act. Helen's letter spoke of the importance of community, of connection, and of the courage required to face oneself honestly. She urged Keanu to lean on those who supported him and to find strength in the shared commitment to his true self. The weight of the past weeks, the mystery, the reflection, the revelations, began to lift slightly, replaced by clarity and renewed purpose. Keanu folded the letter gently, holding it close for a moment. The journey to return was no longer just a personal quest, but a shared mission. He knew now that reclaiming his art and purpose would not be a solitary endeavor, but one supported by those who believed in the light he carried. Later that afternoon, Keanu arranged to meet Tom in the quiet privacy of his home office. The room was softly lit, a contrast to the brightness of the day outside, creating a space where honesty could flourish without distractions. As Tom entered, his familiar, steady presence brought a comforting calm. They sat down, facing each other, the silence between them filled with unspoken understanding. Finally, Keanu broke the quiet. "Tom, I read Helen's letter. I had no idea you were involved." Tom gave a modest nod, his gaze steady but gentle. "She asked me to help, said it was important to remind you of who you truly are, without the noise. I didn't know all the details, just enough to make sure things went smoothly, that you wouldn't feel spooked or pressured." "Ah," Keanu's expression softened. "I'm grateful, more than you know. It's been a lot to process, but knowing you were part of it, that someone I trust was helping me through this, it means everything." Tom smiled quietly. "You've always had people who care, Keanu. Sometimes we just have to help you find your way back when the path gets lost. In the chaos." They spoke then of the years they'd worked together, the countless moments when Tom's role had gone beyond protection, how he'd been a steady anchor amid the storm of fame and expectation, how he'd quietly watched over not just Keanu's safety, but his well-being. Tom admitted that when Helen first approached him, he hesitated. "It's a delicate thing helping someone reconnect with themselves. But I believed in her purpose and in you. So I agreed to be the silent hand behind the scenes." Keanu felt a deep swell of gratitude. The thought that someone had cared so much, that Helen and Tom had taken such care to guide him gently, touched him more than words could express. As they continued talking, Keanu realized how isolated he had sometimes felt, even surrounded by people. This revelation reminded him he was not alone, that the vision he had once held so dearly was still alive in others, people who wanted to see him thrive as the artist and person he truly was. Tom's presence was more than security. It was a reminder of loyalty, friendship, and faith. By the time their conversation ended, Keanu's resolve had deepened. The mystery was no longer daunting, but a gift, a signpost on the journey back to his authentic self. As Tom left, Keanu sat back, the letter from Helen and the trust embodied in Tom's support settling in his heart. The call to return was no longer a solitary echo, but a shared chorus of care and belief. Keanu Reeves was ready to move forward, surrounded by allies, fueled by purpose, and guided by the unwavering light of his true self. The path lay open before him, and he was prepared to walk it with courage and conviction. That night, as darkness settled gently over the city, Keanu found himself unable to sleep. His bedroom, usually a place of rest and quiet, felt charged with a weight far heavier than the silence. The mementos from the past weeks, the letters, photographs, the journal, the screenplay, were spread out around him like pieces of a life puzzle waiting to be reassembled. He sat quietly in his study, the soft glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. His gaze lingered on the familiar objects, each one a thread in the tapestry of his journey. The carved word "return," once a cryptic message, now glowed in his mind as a symbol of something much greater: hope, renewal, and the possibility of realignment. Keanu closed his eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the stillness to fill him. He reflected on the joy and fulfillment of his early career, the days when acting was not just a profession but a calling. The memories came flooding back, the thrill of embodying a character, the camaraderie of the theater troupe, the quiet moments after a performance when the applause had faded but the impact lingered. He recalled the smiles of the people his art had touched, the connections forged through stories told with honesty and heart, the gratitude in the eyes of a young actor whose confidence had been sparked, the tears of an audience member moved by a performance that mirrored their own struggles. These were the moments that had once defined his purpose. They were the true markers of success, far beyond box office numbers or awards. Keanu felt the stirrings of that old passion awakening within him, a flicker of light in the darkness, growing steadily brighter. The return was no longer just a word scratched into wood. It was a call to realign his life with his core values. As the night deepened, Keanu's thoughts grew more introspective. He examined the choices that had led him to this moment, the roles taken for fame, the projects passed over because they didn't fit the commercial mold, the moments when the art had felt secondary to the industry. He admitted to himself the regrets, the times when ambition had overshadowed intention. But he also recognized the growth, the lessons learned, the wisdom gained from a life lived fully, if not always perfectly. In the quiet solitude, Keanu began to meditate on what he truly wanted moving forward. It was not a fleeting desire, but a profound yearning to live authentically, to create meaning in every endeavor. Christina Thurston, Paranormal, illustrated. He envisioned a life where art and purpose intertwined seamlessly, where his work could continue to entertain but also uplift, heal, and inspire. A life where his influence extended beyond the screen to the community, nurturing new talent and championing stories that might otherwise go unheard. The memories of his community work, the small but significant impacts he had witnessed, filled him with renewed determination. Those smiles, those moments of transformation, were reminders that his efforts mattered. Keanu realized that the return was a chance, a sacred opportunity to embrace the man he had always wanted to be. It was a turning point, a moment of reckoning, where he could choose to realign his path with the deepest parts of his soul. He felt a quiet peace settle over him, mingled with excitement for the journey ahead. The challenges would be real, but so would the rewards. With a steady heart, Keanu prepared to meet the future on his own terms. As the first pale light of dawn began to gently filter through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room, Keanu remained seated in quiet contemplation. The stillness of the early morning seemed to hold its breath alongside him, as if acknowledging the weight of the night's reflections. His eyes, though tired, shone with a calm determination, a resolve that had been forged through the darkness of uncertainty and the spark of hope. He carefully gathered the letters, photographs, journal pages, and the screenplay, the tangible pieces of his past and present journey. With reverence, he placed them into a sturdy box, not as mere artifacts or relics, but as sacred treasures, guides to help him navigate the path ahead. Each item carried its own story, its own lesson, and together they formed a map of the man he had been and the man he aspired to become. The word return, once a haunting mystery etched into wood, now pulsed within him as a symbol of renewal and possibility. It was a beacon lighting the way back to his true self, not to a simple repetition of the past, but to a deeper understanding of his purpose and the legacy he wished to leave. Keanu understood that this journey was not about recapturing a youth long gone, nor was it about undoing mistakes. It was about embracing growth, about allowing the experiences of years, both triumphs and regrets, to enrich and deepen his commitment to the ideals that had first inspired him. The night had been a reckoning, a profound moment of reckoning that cut through layers of distraction and doubt. It brought clarity where there had been confusion, and peace where there had been unrest. As the room brightened with the dawn, Keanu felt a quiet but powerful surge of hope. The challenges ahead would be many, and the path would not always be clear or easy, but he was no longer weighed down by fear or hesitation. He was ready to step forward with intention, to live with authenticity and courage, to tell stories that mattered, to uplift others, to use his voice, his influence, and his artistry to make a meaningful difference. Keanu Reeves was no longer a man adrift between expectation and reality. He was anchored by purpose and guided by the unwavering belief in the transformative power of art. The night of reckoning had passed, and with it came the promise of a new beginning, a chance to live fully and faithfully. And as he rose from his chair, the first full light of morning bathing the room in warmth, Keanu felt ready. Ready to embrace the future, to return to the core of who he was, and to walk boldly into the life he was meant to lead. The morning light filtered gently through the windows as Keanu woke with a quiet determination he hadn't felt in years. The reflections from the night before had settled deep in his mind, transforming his thoughts into a clear and focused purpose. Today wasn't just any day. It was the first real step toward reclaiming the values and passions that had once driven him. After a simple breakfast, Keanu made his way to his study, where the collection of letters, photographs, and journals lay neatly arranged. Each item served as a reminder of the journey he had been on, a path marked by both triumphs and challenges. Sitting down at his desk, he opened his laptop and began reaching out to community organizations he had long admired and respected. His emails were carefully crafted, sincere, and filled with a vision that extended beyond entertainment and profit. Keanu proposed collaborative projects that blended film, art therapy, and outreach to underserved populations. Initiatives designed to harness the transformative power of storytelling as a tool for healing and empowerment. He envisioned workshops where participants could engage in creative expression while receiving emotional support, places where their voices could be heard and their stories validated. These projects were intended for schools, community centers, shelters, spaces where art could become a catalyst for change. As he typed, the passion that had fueled his early career surged back. The idealist within him, once quieted by the demands of fame and commercial success, was beginning to roar again. This was no longer a dream confined to notebooks or fleeting thoughts. It was a mission ready to take shape in the world. Later that morning, Keanu reached out to Lisa, his longtime assistant and confidant, someone who had been by his side through every phase of his life and career. When he shared his plans, Lisa's voice was filled with excitement and wholehearted support. "This is exactly the kind of work that will make a real difference," she said. "I can see how much it means to you, and I'm here to help you make it happen." Lisa immediately sprang into action, organizing meetings with potential collaborators, coordinating schedules, and helping to identify the resources they would need. She understood that this shift wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Her unwavering encouragement provided Keanu with the support and grounding he needed as he began to navigate this new chapter. At the same time, Keanu made the difficult decision to step back from some of the more commercial ventures that, while financially successful, no longer aligned with the deeper purpose he wanted to pursue. It was a bold move, one that required not only trust in himself, but in the journey he was undertaking. This decision freed up time and energy, allowing him to focus more fully on projects that stirred his soul, projects rooted in healing, community, and genuine human connection. He began meeting with leaders of local organizations, discussing ways to integrate film and art therapy into existing outreach programs. These conversations were inspiring and humbling. Keanu was reminded that meaningful change often started with small, intentional steps. A word of encouragement, a shared story, a moment of creative expression. Each meeting deepened his conviction that his talents and platform could be used as a powerful force for good, beyond the bright lights of the screen. Slowly but surely, the collaborations he envisioned began to take shape, woven together by a shared commitment to healing and hope. As the day slowly faded into evening, Keanu took a moment in the quiet of his study to reflect on the progress that had begun to unfold. The letters, photographs, and journals that once felt like heavy burdens now lay neatly packed away, replaced in his mind by the invigorating sense of purposeful action. The weight of the past week seemed lighter, transformed by the momentum he was building and the clarity of his new vision. He was acutely aware that the path ahead would be filled with challenges. There would be days when doubts crept in, when old habits whispered temptations to retreat into comfort or old patterns of success. Yet, Keanu felt anchored by the support surrounding him, by Lisa's unwavering dedication, the inspiring conversations with community leaders, and the renewed fire within himself. This support created a foundation of strength beneath him, enabling him to face whatever obstacles might arise. He understood now that meaningful change was rarely sudden or easy. It was a steady process of small, intentional steps, taken with courage and conviction. The collaborative projects he had envisioned, blending film, art therapy, and outreach, were no longer just ideas on paper. They were coming to life through the passion of people who shared his commitment. Together, they were weaving a tapestry of creativity and healing that promised to touch lives far beyond the glitz of the entertainment industry. Keanu's heart swelled with gratitude. He thought of the mentors who had shaped him, the friends who had believed in him even when he faltered, and the communities eager to embrace the transformative power of art. Their faith fueled his resolve to be the artist and person he was meant to be. The word return, once a cryptic and haunting message etched into wood, had evolved into a symbol of hope and renewal. It was a reminder that no matter how far one might stray, the path back to one's true self was always open, waiting to be walked, with courage and purpose. Keanu Reeves was stepping fully into this new chapter, committed not just to personal success, but to creating a legacy defined by meaning, compassion, and genuine connection. As he looked out the window at the city lights twinkling beneath the night sky, Keanu felt a deep sense of peace. The journey to realign his life with his core values was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, the future felt bright and full of promise. With a steady heart and clear vision, he was ready to walk this path, embracing the stories that mattered and the impact only he could make. And this was just the beginning. The day of the gathering dawned bright and clear, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves around the community theater. Keanu stood just outside the familiar building, taking in the scene with a heart full of anticipation and gratitude. The theater had transformed over the years, its worn exterior now freshly painted. Yet the spirit inside remained as vibrant and welcoming as ever. Volunteers bustled about, setting up chairs in neat rows, arranging tables with refreshments, and stringing soft lights to cast a warm glow as the evening approached. The air was alive with quiet excitement, a sense of shared purpose weaving through the conversations and laughter that floated softly from room to room. Keanu's steps were steady but filled with emotion as he entered the theater. The familiar scent of polished wood, paint, and old paper brought back waves of memories, late-night rehearsals, first performances, and countless moments of connection and growth. This was a place where his journey had begun, and now it was the setting for a new beginning. Inside, the walls were adorned with photographs and artwork celebrating past productions and community projects. Each image told a story of challenges overcome, of joy found in creativity, of people coming together in pursuit of something greater than themselves. Keanu moved through the crowd, greeting old friends who had been with him through the earliest days, as well as new collaborators whose passion and dedication promised exciting possibilities. Handshakes turned into embraces, and smiles grew wider as stories and laughter were shared. The atmosphere was intimate, genuine, a far cry from the polished, sometimes distant nature of Hollywood events. Lisa, his trusted assistant, was by his side throughout, coordinating details with practiced ease and offering quiet encouragement. She caught the spark in Keanu's eyes, a fire that had been rekindled and now blazed brightly, lighting the way forward. The gathering wasn't about spectacle or status. It was about connection, community, and the shared commitment to using art as a force for healing and transformation. As the sun began to set and the soft lights twinkled to life, Keanu was invited to speak. The room hushed, all eyes turning toward him with expectation and warmth. Keanu's voice was steady, sincere, carrying the weight of the journey that had brought him here. He began by recounting the mysterious messages, the word return carved into his door, the faded photographs, the journal, and the screenplay that had stirred memories and reflection. He spoke openly about the mentors who had reached out, the friends who had believed in him, and the moments of deep introspection that had reshaped his path. He shared candidly about the challenges of balancing commercial success with authentic artistic expression, acknowledging the times he had drifted away from the ideals that had first inspired him. But more importantly, he spoke of hope, the hope that comes from rediscovery and renewal. Keanu described his commitment to focus on purpose-driven art, stepping back from some commercial ventures to dedicate himself to projects that blended film, art therapy, and community outreach. He outlined his vision for collaborative programs designed to empower underserved populations through creativity and healing. His words were heartfelt, stirring a profound response among the audience. Nods of understanding, smiles of encouragement, and quiet affirmations filled the room. It was clear this gathering was more than a ceremony. It was a shared mission, a collective step toward meaningful change. As Keanu spoke, the faces before him reflected a diverse community: artists, volunteers, educators, and young people whose lives had been touched by the power of art. The energy was palpable, a vibrant blend of passion and possibility. Keanu concluded by expressing his gratitude and inviting everyone to join him on this new journey, a journey grounded in purpose, creativity, and the enduring power of stories to connect and heal. After finishing his heartfelt speech, Keanu stepped down from the small stage to warm applause and nods of approval. The atmosphere inside the community theater shifted seamlessly from quiet reflection to gentle celebration. The space, once filled with anticipation, now blossomed into a vibrant tapestry of connection and shared purpose. Local musicians began to play soft, uplifting melodies, their notes weaving through the room like threads of hope. Young actors from the community theater, many of whom Keanu had met on his recent visit, performed short scenes drawn from stories of resilience, courage, and transformation. Their performances were raw and genuine, carrying the same spirit of authenticity that Keanu had spoken about, stories that reflected the real lives and struggles of the people gathered. Keanu mingled among the crowd, moving from group to group with an open heart and easy smile. He listened intently as people shared their own journeys and dreams, feeling the energy of a community united by a common mission. The stories of hardship and healing, of personal growth and creative breakthroughs, reinforced the importance of the path he had chosen to follow. He exchanged heartfelt embraces with old friends who had stood by him in earlier days, their shared history deepening the sense of reunion. New collaborators expressed excitement and gratitude for the opportunity to work alongside someone so committed to meaningful art and community impact. Each conversation was a thread in a growing fabric of support and inspiration. At one point, Keanu found himself speaking quietly with Lisa, his trusted assistant and steadfast supporter. She smiled warmly, sensing the transformation unfolding not just in his work, but in his spirit. "This feels different," she said softly, like the start of something truly important. Keanu nodded, feeling a swell of hope and determination. The weight of the mysterious messages, the reflections, and the personal reckonings had given way to clarity and resolve. The word return had become more than a symbol. It was a guiding light, leading him home to his purpose. As the evening wore on, conversations deepened, and plans began to take shape. Ideas for new projects that blended film, art therapy, and outreach were exchanged with enthusiasm. Partnerships were forged over shared meals and laughter, the energy in the room electric with possibility. Keanu paused for a moment near the stage, looking out over the faces illuminated by the warm glow of lanterns and string lights. The smiles, the shining eyes, the quiet moments of connection, all these filled him with profound gratitude. He understood that this was not just a gathering or a celebration, but a true beginning, a collective commitment to creating art that healed, inspired, and transformed. The journey ahead would demand courage, patience, and perseverance. There would be challenges to face and obstacles to overcome. But in this room, surrounded by people who believed in the power of stories and the strength of community, Keanu felt ready. He had returned, not just to a place or a memory, but to himself, to his core values, and to a purpose that would guide him for years to come. Keanu Reeves was no longer just an actor or a celebrity. He was a storyteller with a mission, a beacon of hope lighting the way for others. And this night, this gathering, was the first step on that path. Keanu stood quietly on the stage of the community theater, the soft glow of the lights casting gentle shadows around him. The evening's gathering had slowly come to an end, leaving behind a hushed stillness filled with the echoes of shared stories and dreams. Turning to face the camera, Keanu's voice was calm, yet resonant with the weight of the journey he had traveled, a journey marked by discovery, challenge, and renewal. Life often pulls us into roles, he began thoughtfully, not just the characters we play on screen or stage, but the roles we take on in our daily lives. We build these identities carefully, shaped by expectations, those of society, family, even our own fears. We sometimes lose sight of who we really are beneath all those layers. His gaze was steady and open, inviting a moment of reflection. Beneath those layers lies something essential, a core self, untouched by the noise and pressure of the world. It holds our deepest dreams, our values, and the passions that first sparked our spirit. Keanu's expression softened, touched by the memory of his own struggles. For a time, I lost sight of that core. The word return, carved into my door, wasn't just a message, it was a call. A call to remember who I am, beyond the public image and the distractions. He smiled gently, eyes warm with empathy and hope. And that made me wonder, what about you? What parts of yourself have you tucked away? What dreams or values have you set aside because of fear, convenience, or the demands of life? Keanu's voice grew more earnest. This is your invitation to think about your own return, to reconnect with what makes your heart beat stronger. It might be a passion, a cause, or a dream you left behind. Looking directly into the camera, as if speaking to each person individually, he said, "It's never too late to choose purpose over fame, compassion over convenience, and to make a meaningful difference for yourself and for those around you." Keanu's voice softened as he continued, inviting the audience into a space of gentle introspection. Each of us carries stories. Stories about who we are, stories that shape our understanding of ourselves and the world. Sometimes those stories are comforting, but other times they can confine us. We believe them so deeply that they limit our potential and obscure our true selves. He paused thoughtfully. But here's what I've come to realize. Those stories are not set in stone. They're not unchangeable truths. We have the power to revisit them, to question them, and even to rewrite them. We can choose to shed old narratives that no longer serve us and embrace new ones that reflect who we truly want to be. Keanu's gaze became reflective as he shared more of his own journey. I was fortunate to have mentors, friends, and strangers who saw beyond the image I portrayed to the world. They reminded me of the person I once was, the one full of hope, ideals, and a fierce passion for making a difference. Their support helped me find my way back when I felt lost in the noise of expectation and success. He smiled, the warmth in his voice drawing the listener closer. Connection matters. We don't have to face our struggles alone. Whether it's the kindness of a friend, the wisdom of a mentor, or the encouragement of a community, these connections can help us rediscover our path. Keanu's tone became encouraging, almost a whisper of hope. So I want to ask you, if you're listening, what does your return look like? What calls you back to your authentic self? Maybe it's a dream you abandoned, a passion that's been silenced, or a value you set aside for convenience or survival. It could be a relationship you want to heal, a cause you want to champion, or simply a way of living that feels more true to who you are. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady and sincere. Answering that call takes courage. It means facing fears that hold us back, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of the unknown. It means stepping away from what's comfortable or expected and moving towards something uncertain but real. But it also brings freedom. The freedom to live authentically, to create meaning, and to be truly alive. Keanu's words resonated with a gentle but powerful conviction. No matter where you are in your journey, whether you're just beginning to ask these questions or have been searching for answers for years, it's never too late to come back. The path to purpose is always open, waiting for you to take that first step. As his message drew toward its close, Keanu's expression softened further, filled with compassion and hope. Remember this: the person you see in the mirror, beyond the roles you play or the expectations placed upon you, is the one who holds the true power to change your life, your essence, your heart, your values. These are your guiding lights. He smiled gently, voice full of warmth. If there's one lesson life has taught me, it's that true fulfillment doesn't come from fame, fortune, or accolades. It comes from choosing purpose over recognition, kindness over convenience, and connection over isolation. It comes from living a life aligned with your deepest truths. Keanu's gaze was steady and sincere as he spoke directly to the viewer. I share my story not because I have all the answers, but because I want you to know you're not alone. We all face moments when we feel disconnected from ourselves, when the path forward is unclear. But the good news is, it's never too late to come home to who you truly are. The camera slowly pulled back, revealing the empty theater bathed in soft, fading light. The walls seemed to hold a lifetime of stories. Stories of loss and hope, of struggle and growth, of endings and new beginnings. The community theater stood as a symbol of transformation, a place where lives were changed by the power of storytelling. Keanu's final words echoed gently as he took a step away from the camera. May your own journey of return be filled with courage, love, and the unwavering belief that your story matters, because it does, and the world needs the light only you can shine. The screen faded to black, leaving the audience with a lasting sense of hope and inspiration.